Hi guys, welcome back to the channel. So I wanted to react to this take from Jazz Jennings. I'm assuming it's about the Supreme Court case and Jazz's stance on male athletes competing in women's sports, or as Jazz puts it, trans girls being allowed to compete in sports, when obviously nobody's saying that none of these people can compete in sports. But we are saying that everybody has to compete in the correct category. So let's take a look.
Let's talk about trans athletes in sports. When it comes to the current Supreme Court cases, I see that while a lot of you do support the trans community, you draw the line when it comes to trans athletes in sports. You say that trans women do in fact have a competitive advantage being born biologically male. While I understand this perspective, I see things differently. First of all, young children before puberty have no competitive advantage. There is little to no difference between boys and girls at this age. On top of this, trans youth who are blocked from going through male puberty also have no competitive advantage. Trans women who did go through male puberty are often on hormones like estrogen, which actually decrease muscle mass and reduce strength. There are biological women who are taller, faster, and stronger than trans athletes. There are biological women who have more testosterone than trans athletes. The limitations are arbitrary and unfair. It's also important to note that 0.001% of professional athletes are trans. Can you name 10 trans athletes without looking it up? Lastly, recreational sports should be less about winning and losing and more about being a part of a team, making friends, and having fun. While some sports are individual, a lot of sports are about being a part of a team. Winning and losing does not come down to one individual player. When I was 8 years old, I was banned from playing girls soccer. I was told I had a competitive advantage. However, I was one of the smallest girls on the team. No trans child should be denied the right to follow their passion and do something they love to do. Let transgender people play.
Right, so first of all, the Supreme Court are deciding this case about two transgender athletes competing in women's sports. One started competing in middle school, the other one is an older male athlete. What we do not want the Supreme Court to do under any circumstances is make this idea of puberty blockers being a gateway into women's sports or being a gateway into girls' sports. The Supreme Court should never put that message out that as long as they're transitioned before puberty, as long as they were on puberty blockers, that it's okay for male athletes to compete in girls' sports. I don't believe that's the job of the Supreme Court, to put that message out there. Puberty blockers should never be a gateway into women's sports. It incentivizes these insane parents. Sorry, but Jazz's mother, for example, springs to mind.
But with her, I'm worried about her mental well-being and her dilation. The minute she leaves my house, we have a dilation problem.
That is a concern. When you don't have that watchful eye, they tend to go back to old patterns.
I have woken Jazz out of a dead sleep and taken the dilator and put the lubrication on it and said, here, you take this and you put it in your vagina, if not, I will. But Jazz is bad, even when I'm home once a day. I will be so mad if she goes away to college and that thing seals up. I will wring her neck. Can you imagine? No, I can't imagine.
Who tell their kids that they're in the wrong body and put their kids on medications that chemically castrate their children. I don't think the Supreme Court should be condoning that and incentivizing these parents to transition earlier. Putting up kids such as Jazz, who was just a child at the time, around the age of 11, was put on these medications as the poster children for early transition. Absolutely not. Second of all, do not let anybody fool you into believing this is about allowing 8-year-old trans girls to play sports. These same people were perfectly fine with grown men showing up, claiming to be women and competing against girls. They were perfectly fine with that. Men and boys, teenagers who were not on any medications whatsoever, who certainly went through male puberty, they were okay with them competing against girls. They were okay with them competing in women's sports. And they told the women that they had to be okay with it too. That if they didn't, if they objected, they were bigots. We were told that we're not allowed to question somebody's transition. We're not allowed to question whether somebody's on hormones or had the surgery. That is not a measure of their womanhood. How dare we put these requirements on these male athletes? That's what we were told. And it's still going on today. Grown men who aren't on any medications, who haven't suppressed their testosterone in any way, competing against girls. And we know that men and women, whether one is male or female, comes down to more than just hormones. And I find it hard to believe that these male athletes, that some of them have less testosterone than women. They're always producing testosterone, even if they're on medications. They make these statements without providing any proof whatsoever. The fact is, the NCAA had a policy that said that testosterone had to be under 10 nanomoles. 10 nanomoles is nowhere near the testosterone levels that women have. Even women in the so-called higher range is nowhere near 10 nanomoles. The range for women at max would be 2.4 nanomoles. High school girls, many female athletes have been competing against men who aren't on any medications, who haven't suppressed their testosterone for the longest time, and are still competing against men who haven't suppressed their testosterone, who have just walked onto the track, walked onto the field, claiming to be women, and they're allowed to compete in the women's category. And these same people were okay with that, and have been okay with that for the longest time. Now they want to pretend that they care about hormone levels simply because of what's going on at the Supreme Court at the moment and what they're discussing. Because these athletes, one was on puberty blockers. So that makes it okay. And that's the angle they're going with now. Absolutely not. And let's not pretend that allowing men and boys to identify themselves into the women's category doesn't have repercussions beyond losing medals, beyond losing championships, beyond losing a spot on the team or a place at a certain event, which is bad enough. There are repercussions that have led women and girls open to SA, open to sexual harassment. Even one of the athletes in this very case that we're talking about has been accused of sexual harassment at a very young age. So even at a young age, girls shouldn't be forced to share locker rooms with boys if they want to compete in sports. That is not a real choice for them. That is not a real option. Women shouldn't be subjected to trauma and re-traumatization because they've ended up being in a shower with a man present, or having to undress with a man present, or being exposed to male genitalia in the locker room. The repercussions go way beyond losing medals and losing championships. And these same people stood back and told these women to be kind while they were being subjected to abuse. These same people had no compassion for the women who came forward and said that I don't want to be in the locker room with a man. Those women were called transphobic. So miss me with this is about 8-year-old boys wanting to play sports. This is about teamwork. No one cared about how it affected the female athletes who had to compete against the team with the male player. And yes, it does give that team an edge, an advantage. Let's not pretend. But rather than talking about advantages, because I don't even think the Supreme Court is, I don't think the Supreme Court decision rides on advantages. Whether males have advantages over women, obviously they do. Even when they're on hormones and puberty blockers, the studies show that the advantages remain. Why? Because the male and female bodies differ beyond simply hormone levels. Rather than talking about advantages, we can go back and forth all day. And clearly, it's not a winning argument for the trans activists anyway. Talk about the meaning and the true purpose of Title IX. Do women need their own category or not? Are they entitled to their own category under Title IX? Yes or no? It's as simple as that. Does Title IX afford female athletes their own sports? Should women's sports exist or not? Answer that question rather than going back and forth about advantages and trying to manipulate people. with this idea that it's about stopping children from playing sports. Do women have the right to expect their own sports? Those are the questions. That should be the focus, because that's what we're talking about here. Doesn't matter what medications a male athlete has been on. If somebody who was born male, and remains male, by the way, can compete in women's sports, then there is no women's sports. There is no female category. Are you okay with that? You cannot have both. You cannot have male athletes crossing over into the women's category and claim that we have women's sports. Either women's sports exists as its own category of sports, or it's simply a subcategory of men's sports. Which one is it? And bear in mind, unlike these male athletes who have options, they can compete in the category that aligns with their biological sex. So they can compete with the boys, they can compete with the men, or they can push for their own category. The women and girls, on the other hand, they do not have any other option. So when you say that male athletes can compete in their category, you're for the exclusion of women and girls from their own sports. There's no way around that. So don't talk to me about inclusion, being inclusive, while advocating for women and girls to be excluded, including by way of injury. There are women who have been permanently excluded from sports because they have been injured by male athletes. So let me know what you think. Thanks for watching. Like, comment and subscribe. Take care of yourselves, and God willing, I will see you in the next video.